Most people hate working the graveyard shift at a diner. I loved it. There's something peaceful about the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, when the world slows down and the only customers are insomniacs, taxi drivers, and the occasional drunk stumbling in for coffee. My name is Elena Martinez, I'm 24 years old, and I've been slinging hash and pouring coffee at Morrison's Diner for 3 years now. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and gives me time during the day to work on my art. That's what I tell myself anyway. But on the night of October 23rd, everything I thought I knew about my quiet little diner, my quiet little life, and honestly about reality itself, was about to change forever. It started simply enough. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 2:47 a.m. I looked up from wiping down the counter and saw them walk in. A man and a boy. And the moment I saw them, I knew something was different. Something was very, very wrong. Or maybe, just maybe, something was finally about to be right. The man was tall, impossibly tall, probably 6'5" at least. He wore an expensive black suit that looked like it cost more than my car, and his dark hair was swept back perfectly despite the late hour. But it was his eyes that caught me. They were an unusual shade of amber, almost golden, and they seemed to glow slightly in the fluorescent lights of the diner. He moved with a grace that seemed unnatural, like every step was choreographed. And then there was the boy. He looked about 12 or 13, with the same dark hair and those same striking amber eyes. He wore a simple black sweater and jeans, but he walked slightly behind the man, his head down, shoulders hunched inward like he was trying to make himself invisible. They took a booth in the back corner, the one nobody ever sits in because the vinyl is cracked and the table wobbles. The man sat first, gesturing for the boy to sit across from him. The boy complied immediately, still not raising his eyes. I grabbed 2 menus and walked over, putting on my customer service smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you off with some coffee?" The man looked up at me with those intense golden eyes and smiled. It was a beautiful smile, perfect teeth, but something about it made my skin prickle. "Coffee would be delightful, thank you." "Black, please." "The boy will have hot chocolate." His voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. "European, maybe." I nodded and glanced at the boy, who still hadn't looked up. And that's when I noticed his hands. The boy's hands were moving. Not fidgeting, not playing with the napkin dispenser, but moving with purpose. His fingers formed shapes, patterns, configurations. He was signing. I recognized it immediately because my little brother Tommy is deaf. I've known American Sign Language since I was 8 years old. The boy was signing, "I don't like hot chocolate. I want apple juice." But he wasn't signing to anyone. His head was still down, his hands moving almost unconsciously in his lap where the man couldn't see them. The man was looking at me, waiting for me to leave and get their drinks. He had no idea his son was communicating, or trying to. Something twisted in my chest. I knew that feeling. The feeling of having words trapped inside you that no one bothers to hear. Without thinking too hard about it, I shifted my notepad to my left hand and signed back to the boy, keeping my hand low and casual so the man wouldn't notice. "Would you prefer apple juice instead?" The boy's head snapped up. His eyes went wide, those golden eyes so much like the man's but filled with shock, with hope, with something that looked like it might have been the beginning of tears. For a moment, we just stared at each other. And then, slowly, he signed back. "You can see me?" Those 4 words hit me harder than they should have. "You can see me?" Not, "You know sign language," or, "You understand me," but, "You can see me." Like he'd been invisible his whole life. I wanted to respond right away, but the man was watching now, his golden eyes moving between his son and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Suspicion? Curiosity? Something else? "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice still smooth but with an edge to it now. I had to think fast. No problem at all, sir. I was just asking if your son had any dietary restrictions or allergies I should know about. We have several options besides hot chocolate. It was a reasonable thing for a waitress to ask, and technically true. The man's expression softened slightly. How thoughtful. No allergies. The hot chocolate will be fine. He looked at his son, who had immediately dropped his gaze back to the table. Isn't that right, Adrian? The boy, Adrian, didn't respond. He couldn't, of course. But the man seemed to expect him to nod or make some gesture. When Adrian remained still and silent, the man's jaw tightened just slightly. Answer me, Adrian. Still nothing. The silence stretched out, becoming uncomfortable. I could see Adrian's hands beginning to move again in his lap, nervous, agitated movements that weren't quite signs but close. And suddenly I understood something. This man didn't know his son was trying to communicate. He thought Adrian was just being defiant, being rude. He had no idea about the sign language. I made a decision in that moment that would change everything. I'll bring the hot chocolate, I said to the man. Then I looked directly at Adrian and signed, small and quick, and I'll bring apple juice too. Your choice. Adrian's eyes found mine again, and this time there was definitely the shimmer of tears. He signed back, so small I almost missed it. Thank you. The man noticed Adrian looking at me but didn't see the hand movements. My son doesn't speak much, he said, and there was something in his voice. Frustration? Disappointment? He's rather shy around strangers. I nodded sympathetically. That's okay. Not everyone's a talker. Some of the best people I know are quiet. Something flickered across the man's face. Surprise, maybe. Like he wasn't used to people being understanding about his silent son. I went back to the counter and prepared their drinks. As I made the hot chocolate and poured the apple juice, my mind was racing. Who were these people? Why was the man so formal, so old-fashioned in his mannerisms? Why did they both have those strange golden eyes that seemed to catch the light in impossible ways? And most importantly, why didn't this man know his own son used sign language? When I brought the drinks back, I set the hot chocolate in front of the man and placed both the apple juice and the hot chocolate in front of Adrian. The man raised an eyebrow. He only needs one drink. First one's on the house, I said with a smile. Can't decide what I'd want at this hour either. The man seemed suspicious but didn't argue. He opened his menu and began studying it with an intensity that seemed excessive for a diner menu that hadn't changed in 15 years. Adrian, meanwhile, reached for the apple juice immediately. His hands were shaking slightly as he lifted the glass. As I took their order, writing down a steak for the man and a burger for Adrian, I watched them. The way the man would speak and Adrian would remain motionless. The way Adrian's hands would move and the man would ignore them completely. The way there was this invisible wall between father and son, built not of malice but of sheer failure to communicate. After I put their order in with the cook, I busied myself with side work, but I kept glancing at their booth. Adrian had pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and was drawing something. His hands moved with the same grace his father had when he walked, precise and purposeful. The man was on his phone now, speaking quietly in that language I couldn't identify. And then, disaster. The man stood up abruptly. I need to take this call outside. Stay here, Adrian. Don't move. Don't bother the staff. Do you understand? Adrian didn't respond, didn't even look up from his drawing. The man's expression darkened. Adrian. Look at me when I'm speaking to you. Slowly, Adrian raised his eyes. There was fear there now, real fear. The man stared at his son for a long moment, and I could see Adrian shrinking into himself, becoming smaller. Finally, the man turned and walked out the front door, phone pressed to his ear. The moment he was gone, Adrian's whole body sagged with relief. I waited about 30 seconds to make sure the man wasn't coming back immediately, then I grabbed a coffee pot as an excuse and walked over to Adrian's booth. "Refill?" I asked out loud, then signed, "Are you okay?" Adrian looked at the door nervously, then back at me. His hands moved quickly. He doesn't know I can sign. He doesn't know I can understand everything. He thinks I'm. He paused, struggling with the signs. "Broken. Less than." My heart broke a little. "You're not broken," I signed back. "You're just different. And different is okay." "Not where I come from," Adrian signed. "Where I come from, if you can't speak, if you're not perfect, you're nothing. You're ignored. You might as well not exist. Where are you from?" I signed, genuinely curious now. Adrian's hands stopped. He stared at me for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust me. Then he signed something that made my blood run cold. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. You'd think I was crazy." "Try me," I signed. "I've seen a lot of weird things working night shift." Adrian glanced at the door again. His father was still outside, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk while talking on his phone. Adrian took a deep breath and signed. "My father is the vampire king of the Eastern Territories. I am Prince Adrian Nikolai Thorne. And I am the greatest disappointment in our family's 1,000-year history because I cannot speak and therefore cannot use the voice of command that all our kind possess." For a moment, I just stared at him. Vampires. He was telling me his father was a vampire king. That he was a vampire prince. My rational mind immediately rejected it. This was crazy. The kid was clearly troubled, probably had an abusive home situation and had created an elaborate fantasy to cope. That made sense. That was logical. Except for those eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Except for the way his father moved, too graceful, too perfect. Except for the fact that they'd come into a diner at 2:47 in the morning and the man had ordered a steak so rare it was basically still bleeding. Except for 1,000 tiny details that my brain had been cataloging and dismissing, but that now rushed back all at once. "You don't believe me," Adrian signed, seeing my expression. "It's okay. No one ever believes the mute boy." "I didn't say that," I signed back quickly. "I'm just processing." "He'll be back soon," Adrian signed. "Please don't tell him we talked. Please don't tell him you can understand me. He'll just take me away and I'll never meet anyone who can see me again." There was such desperation in his movements, such naked need, that it didn't matter if I believed the vampire story or not. This was a lonely kid who'd finally found someone who could communicate with him, and I wasn't about to take that away. "I won't tell him," I signed. "I promise." "But can I ask you something?" Adrian nodded. "Why doesn't he know you can sign?" "How is that possible?" Adrian's answer came slowly, each sign heavy with years of pain. "In our world, there is only one form of communication that matters. The voice. It's how we command others, how we establish dominance, how we prove our worth. My father has the most powerful voice in our kingdom. When he speaks, everyone must obey. Everyone except me, because I am deaf to it. I was born unable to hear the voice, unable to use it." He paused, then continued. "When they realized I couldn't speak, couldn't use the voice, they assumed I was completely damaged. My father tried everything. Healers, magic, even human doctors. Nothing worked. So he gave up. Decided I was a failed experiment, a genetic dead end. He keeps me around because I'm his son, but he doesn't really see me. None of them do. So you taught yourself sign language? I signed. Yes. I found books in the human world. Videos online. I practiced in secret. Because even though they can't hear me, I still have things to say. I still have thoughts, feelings, ideas. I'm still a person, even if I can't speak their precious voice. You are a person, I signed firmly. And you deserve to be heard. Before Adrian could respond, the bell above the door chimed. His father was back. Adrian's hands disappeared under the table immediately, and his expression went blank. It was like watching a light switch off. The vibrant, communicative boy vanished, replaced by the empty shell his father expected to see. The man slid back into the booth, not even glancing at his son. My apologies, he said to me as I approached with the coffee pot. Business matters that couldn't wait. As the night wore on, I brought their food and watched the dynamic between father and son with new eyes. The man, who I now knew was some kind of vampire royalty whether I fully believed it or not, ate his extremely rare steak with impeccable table manners. He made small talk with me about the weather, the town, completely mundane things. Meanwhile, Adrian picked at his burger, occasionally sneaking glances at me when his father wasn't looking. Every time our eyes met, I tried to convey with just a look that I saw him, that I understood. And every time, he seemed to sit up just a little straighter, seemed just a little less invisible. Around 4 a.m., the man excused himself to use the restroom. The moment he was out of sight, Adrian's hands flew into motion. "Can I ask you something?" he signed. Of course, I signed back. "Why are you being kind to me? Most humans who figure out what we are, they're scared. They run. But you're just being nice." Why? It was a good question. Why was I being nice? By all rights, if I believed his story, I should be terrified. But looking at this kid who'd been invisible his whole life, who'd taught himself a whole language just to be able to express himself even though no one was listening, I couldn't find it in myself to be scared. Because everyone deserves kindness, I signed. And because my little brother is deaf too. I know what it's like when people look through you instead of at you. I know what it's like to have words trapped inside that no one bothers to hear. Adrian's eyes widened. "You have a deaf brother?" "Yeah. Tommy. He's 16 now. When he was first diagnosed, a lot of people treated him like he was broken too. Like being deaf made him less than. But he's not. He's smart and funny and talented. He just communicates differently." "Does your brother feel invisible too?" "Sometimes. But he has people who see him. Me, our parents, his friends at school. Everyone needs people who see them. Where are you watching this from right now? What time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments. I love knowing who's listening to these stories across the world. And if you're enjoying Adrian's story so far, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and turn on notifications because this tale is just getting started. Now, let's continue. Adrian signed quickly. "I've never had that. Someone who sees me." "Well, you do now," I signed. Then I did something probably incredibly stupid. I pulled out my phone and quickly typed out my number on a note in the Notepad app. I showed it to Adrian. "If you ever need someone to talk to, someone who can understand you, you can text me. I know ASL through text too." Adrian stared at the number like I'd just handed him a winning lottery ticket. His hands shook as he pulled out his own phone and saved the contact. Just in time too, because his father was returning from the restroom. For the next hour, they sat in that booth. The man made several more phone calls, each time stepping outside. Each time he did, Adrian and I would have quick signed conversations. I learned that they were traveling through town, staying at an expensive hotel downtown for some kind of vampire council meeting. I learned that Adrian was actually 114 years old, though he'd stopped aging at 13. I learned that his mother had died decades ago and that he had no siblings, no friends, no one in his life who treated him like he mattered. And I learned that for all his wealth and power, this child was profoundly, desperately lonely. When they finally got up to leave around 5:30 a.m., the man paid the bill and left a generous tip. "Thank you for the excellent service," he said formally. "We may return tomorrow night if our business keeps us in town." "You're always welcome here," I said, looking at Adrian as I said it. Adrian's face remained carefully neutral, but he signed one quick word as he turned to leave. Tomorrow. I couldn't sleep when I got home that morning. My mind kept replaying the night's events. Vampires. The kid had said his father was a vampire king. Was I really believing this? But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces fit. The golden eyes. The unnatural grace. The fact that they only came to the diner in the dead of night. The way the man had ordered his meat practically raw. The old-fashioned formality of his speech and manners. And there was something else, something I'd noticed but not consciously registered. Neither of them had cast a proper shadow under the fluorescent lights. I pulled out my phone and did something I probably shouldn't have. I Googled Vampire King Eastern Territories. To my shock, I actually found something. Not on normal search results, but buried in obscure forums and paranormal websites that I would normally dismiss as fiction. References to the Thorne family. To King Nikolai Thorne, ruler of the Eastern Vampire Territories for over 500 years. To his son, Prince Adrian, who was never seen in public, whose existence was barely acknowledged by vampire society. There was even a blurry photograph, allegedly from some kind of vampire gathering. I zoomed in on the faces. It was them. The man and the boy from the diner. My hand started shaking. This was real. This was actually real. I just spent my shift serving coffee to literal vampires. And I'd promised to help one of them. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. But I knew who it was. "Hi. It's Adrian. Is it okay that I'm texting you?" I typed back immediately. "Of course it's okay. How are you doing?" The response took a few minutes. "Better than usual. I can't stop thinking about last night. About being seen." Is it always like that? Talking to someone who understands? Over the next 12 hours, Adrian and I texted back and forth. At first, it was simple things. I asked about his favorite books, favorite movies, what he liked to draw. He asked about my life, my family, what it was like to be human in the modern world. But gradually, the conversation deepened. He told me about the vampire world I'd never known existed. About the complex hierarchies and ancient traditions. About how the voice was everything in their society, the ultimate measure of power and worth. About how those who couldn't use it were seen as defective, worthless. He told me about council meetings where he had to sit in the corner, silent and ignored, while his father made decisions that affected thousands of vampires. About royal dinners where no one spoke to him, where servers literally looked through him as if he wasn't there. About centuries of invisibility, of having thoughts and opinions that no one cared to know. And I told him about Tommy. About the fights we'd had with school administrators who wanted to segregate him. About the relatives who'd suggested he should be institutionalized. About the slowly growing acceptance and how we'd built a life where Tommy wasn't invisible, where he mattered. "Your brother is lucky to have you," Adrian texted. "You both have each other. That must be nice." "You could have that too," I typed back. "You could have people who see you, who value you. You deserve that. My father would never allow it. He's already angry that I embarrass him by existing. If I started making friends, especially human friends, he'd probably lock me away completely. Can he do that? You're a prince, don't you have any rights?" Not when you're a defective prince. I'm only kept around because killing me would be seen as weak. But I have no power, no voice in decisions. I'm just a reminder of my father's failure to produce a proper heir. They came back to the diner at exactly 2:47 a.m., the same time as before. I'd been watching the clock for hours, nervous and excited in equal measure. Adrian walked in behind his father with the same hunched posture, the same downcast eyes. But when he looked up and saw me, just for a second, he smiled. It was the first smile I'd seen on his face, and it transformed him completely. For just that moment, he wasn't an invisible prince or a disappointment or a genetic failure. He was just a kid who was happy to see a friend. They took the same booth. The man ordered the same drinks, the same meals. But this time, I was ready. I'd practiced in front of my mirror at home, worked out how to sign while holding my notepad in a way that looked natural, casual, like I was just gesturing while I talked. Everything the same as yesterday? I asked the man out loud. Yes, thank you. Though I must compliment you on your service. It's rare to find such attentiveness in modern establishments. I try to pay attention to what people need, I said, and looked directly at Adrian when I said it. Even when they can't say it out loud. The man didn't notice the subtext, but Adrian did. His hands moved slightly in his lap. Thank you. This time, when the man stepped outside to take a phone call, Adrian and I had a longer conversation. How are the council meetings going? I signed. Terrible. They're arguing about territory disputes and human relations and nobody can agree on anything. Father spends hours yelling at people through the voice, forcing them to comply. It's exhausting to watch. Can you tell what he's saying even though you can't hear the voice? I can read lips. And I can feel the power he uses, even if I can't hear it. It's like a pressure in the air, a weight that makes everyone else bow down. Everyone except me. Over the next week, this became our routine. Father and son would come to the diner every night around the same time. The man would order, make phone calls, conduct business, completely oblivious to his son. And Adrian and I would have conversations in the spaces between, in the stolen moments when his father wasn't watching. I learned more about vampire society than any human probably should. About how they'd hidden in plain sight for millennia, about the rules that governed their interaction with humans, about the delicate balance of power between the different vampire families and territories. And Adrian learned about the human world he'd been kept from. About social media and memes, about music and art, about all the tiny beautiful things that make life worth living. But I also learned something else. The man, King Nikolai, was not just Adrian's father. He was a dangerous, powerful being who had literally killed people who displeased him. Adrian showed me the scars on his arms one night, faint silver lines that were apparently hard for vampires to heal. From when I was younger, he signed. When father was still trying to force me to speak. He thought pain might trigger the voice. It didn't. I felt sick. This wasn't just neglect. This was abuse. Adrian, you need to get away from him, I signed. This isn't okay. What he's doing to you isn't okay. Where would I go? I'm a vampire prince. I can't just run away. And besides, he'd find me. He always finds things he considers his property. The word property made my blood boil. You're not property. You're a person. Not in his eyes. Not in anyone's eyes in our world. It was on the 8th night that everything changed. The man, King Nikolai, seemed more agitated than usual. His phone calls were louder, his commands sharper. When he came back from one particularly heated conversation, he didn't sit down. We need to leave, he told Adrian. The council has been called back to the capital. We depart immediately. Adrian's face fell. He looked at me with such desperation that I felt my heart crack. "I'll settle the bill," the king said to me, pulling out his wallet. As he counted out bills, Adrian signed frantically. "Please. I don't want to go back. I don't want to be invisible again." Without thinking, I signed back. "Then don't go." "What choice do I have?" "There's always a choice. You're stronger than you think." The king finished paying and turned to Adrian. "Come. Now." Adrian stood slowly. And then he did something that shocked both his father and me. He turned to me and signed, clearly and deliberately, right in front of his father. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for being my friend. I'll never forget you." The king's eyes widened. He stared at his son's moving hands, then at me, then back at Adrian. "What is he doing?" he demanded. "What is this?" I made a decision in that moment that I knew was probably going to end badly, but I couldn't help it. I signed back to Adrian, where his father could see. "You don't have to go if you don't want to. You know sign language?" The king's voice was dangerously quiet. "You've been communicating with my son this entire time?" "Yes," I said out loud. "Because he deserves to be heard. He deserves to be seen. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button right now. Give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and turn on those notifications because we're heading into the climax and you won't want to miss what happens next." The king's golden eyes were blazing now, and I could feel something emanating from him. Power. Raw, ancient power that made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. This was the voice, I realized. He was using it on me. "You will forget this conversation," he commanded, and I could feel the words trying to sink into my brain like hooks. "You will forget my son. You will forget everything about us." But here's the thing about the voice that Adrian had explained to me. It works on fear. It works on submission. It works on people who believe they have no choice but to obey. And I was a 24-year-old woman who'd worked night shift at a diner for 3 years, who'd dealt with drunk customers and handsy truckers and people who thought waitresses were beneath them. I'd learned a long time ago not to be afraid of men who thought their authority made them gods. "No," I said simply. The king blinked. "What?" I said no. I won't forget Adrian. I won't pretend he doesn't exist. And I won't let you make him invisible anymore. For a long moment, the king just stared at me. Then he started laughing, a cold, dangerous sound. "You think you can defy me? You're human. You're nothing. I could kill you with one hand." "Maybe," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But then you just prove what everyone already knows. That you're afraid of a mute boy being seen as he truly is. That you're so insecure in your power that you have to make your own son disappear." The king's hand shot out and grabbed my throat. Not hard enough to hurt, but enough to make his point. "Choose your next words very carefully, human." And then Adrian did something I never expected. He grabbed his father's arm and pulled. Adrian couldn't speak. He'd never spoken a word in his life. But when he pulled his father's arm away from my throat, when he stepped between us, when he stood up to his full height and looked his father directly in the eyes, he commanded the room more completely than any voice ever could. The king stared at his son in shock. Adrian had never defied him before. Had never stood up to him. Had always been the perfect invisible disappointment, there but not there, seen but not acknowledged. But now Adrian was signing, and his movements were sharp, angry, powerful. "You don't get to hurt her. You don't get to make her disappear like you made me disappear. She's the first person in 114 years who's treated me like a person, and I won't let you take that from me." The king couldn't understand the signs, but he understood the defiance. "Adrian, stand down. This is not your concern." Adrian signed faster, and I translated for him, my voice growing stronger with each word. He says it is his concern. He says you've spent his entire life telling him he's worthless because he can't use the voice, but the voice isn't the only way to have power. He says you're so obsessed with that one form of communication that you've made yourself deaf to every other kind. He says he's been speaking his whole life, and you've just been too arrogant to listen. The king's face cycled through emotions. Rage, confusion, and then something that might have been shame. I don't understand these hand movements. I don't know what he's saying. That's the point, I said quietly. You never bothered to learn. You decided he was broken and gave up. But he's not broken. He's brilliant and creative, and he's been trying to talk to you for over a century. You just weren't listening. For a long moment, the king stood there, looking at his son like he was seeing him for the first time. And maybe he was. Maybe for the first time in Adrian's long life, his father was actually looking at him, not through him. How long? The king asked quietly. How long have you been able to communicate like this? Adrian signed, and I translated. Since I was 20. I taught myself. I learned human sign language because our people refused to accommodate me. I learned to read and write in a dozen languages because I had nothing else to do while everyone ignored me. I learned everything I could about the world because I wasn't allowed to participate in ours. Why didn't you tell me? I tried. You wouldn't listen. You'd already decided what I was and what I wasn't. Nothing I did would have changed your mind. The king looked stricken. Really, genuinely upset in a way I hadn't thought possible. I thought I was protecting you, he said. I thought if I kept you close, kept you safe, you'd be okay. I didn't realize I was making you invisible. You weren't protecting me. You were hiding me. There's a difference. The king turned to me. You did this. You showed him he could be seen. No, I said. I just saw what was already there. Adrian did this himself. He's always been here, been whole, been worthy. You just needed to look. The king was quiet for a long time. Then he did something that shocked both Adrian and me. He sat down at the booth, gestured for Adrian to sit across from him, and said, "Teach me. Teach me these hand movements. Teach me how to speak to my son." That night, in a corner booth of Morrison's diner, a vampire king learned his first sign language from his son. It was clumsy at first. His ancient, powerful hand struggled with the precise movements. He made mistakes, got frustrated, had to start over multiple times. But he kept trying. And for the first time in his life, Adrian taught his father something. Showed him something. Mattered. They stayed until dawn was approaching, far longer than vampires should stay out. I taught them both more signs, basic conversational ASL that they could use to start building a real relationship. At one point, the king turned to me and said, "I owe you an apology. And my thanks." I was so certain I knew what was best for my son that I never asked him what he needed. You did in one night what I failed to do in a century. It's not too late, I said. It's never too late to start listening. Before they left, as the sky was starting to lighten in the east, Adrian signed to me. "Will I see you again?" "I work every night," I signed back. "And besides, we're friends now. Friends don't disappear on each other." Adrian hugged me then, a quick fierce hug that said everything words couldn't. And his father, the terrifying vampire king of the Eastern Territories, shook my hand and said, "Thank you for seeing my son. Thank you for teaching me to see him too." After they left, I cleaned up their booth and found a note Adrian had left. It was a drawing, a beautiful sketch of the diner with me behind the counter and him sitting at the booth, and above it, written in careful letters, "The night I became visible." I keep that drawing in my locker at work. And 3 times a week now, like clockwork, a vampire king and his son come to the diner for their standing lesson in sign language. Adrian is teaching his father how to communicate. The king is teaching Adrian about vampire politics and history, things he'd always excluded him from before. And slowly, carefully, they're building something they never had before. A relationship. A real one, built on communication and respect and the simple act of seeing each other. As for me, I still work the night shift. I still sling hash and pour coffee. But now I also teach sign language to vampires and occasionally mediate between a father and son who are learning, after a century of silence, how to speak to each other. It's not the life I expected. But it's the life I choose. Because everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to be heard. Even vampire princes who communicate with their hands instead of their voices. Especially them. But our story doesn't end there. Because 3 weeks after that first conversation, everything got complicated again. It was a Tuesday night, quieter than usual. Adrian and his father were at their regular booth, practicing the sign for understanding when Adrian's phone lit up. I watched his face go pale as he read the message. His hands started shaking. King Nikolai noticed immediately. He'd gotten much better at reading his son's body language. "What's wrong?" He signed, still clumsy but improving. Adrian showed him the phone. I couldn't see what it said, but the king's expression turned dark. "When?" he asked out loud. Adrian signed a response. His father's jaw clenched. "That's in 3 days." He looked at me, and I could see genuine worry in those golden eyes. "The High Council has summoned us. All the vampire families, all the territories. They've heard rumors about Adrian. About his abilities. About his interaction with humans." My stomach dropped. "Is that bad?" "It could be catastrophic," the king said grimly. "The High Council doesn't approve of vampires who are too close to humans. And they definitely don't approve of princes who are seen as defective showing signs of strength or independence. They see it as a threat to the established order." Adrian was signing frantically now. I could make out the words, "hide," and "secret," and "please." "He's asking if we can hide what's happened," the king translated. "Pretend he's still the silent, invisible disappointment everyone expects." "Absolutely not," I said firmly, and both of them looked at me in surprise. "You're not going backwards. You're not pretending to be less than you are just because some old vampires are afraid of change." The king studied me for a long moment. "You don't understand what you're asking. The High Council has existed for over 2,000 years. They've destroyed vampire families for less than this. If they decide Adrian is a threat, or that I've been negligent in my duties by allowing him to fraternize with humans, they could strip us of our titles, our territories, our very lives. Then we need to show them Adrian isn't a threat," I said. "We need to show them he's an asset." "How?" Adrian signed. "They'll never listen to me. I can't use the voice. To them, I'm worthless." "Then we change the conversation," I said, an idea forming in my mind. "We make them see that the voice isn't the only form of power. That communication comes in many forms. That their rigid definition of worth is actually limiting vampire society." The king laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was almost admiring. "You want to challenge the oldest, most powerful vampires in existence on their fundamental beliefs about power and hierarchy? With 3 days' notice?" "Yes," I said simply. "And you're going to help me?" Over the next hour, we planned. It was crazy, it was dangerous, it was probably going to get us all killed. But it was also the only chance Adrian had to be truly seen by his own people. The king would request a formal audience. He would present Adrian not as a disappointment, but as an innovation. A prince who'd adapted to his limitations and developed entirely new skills. A bridge between the vampire and human worlds. And I would be there. A human, teaching the High Council something they didn't know. Showing them a world they dismissed. They'll never allow a human at the council meeting, the king warned. Humans are forbidden in our inner sanctums. Then make me not human, I said. Both Adrian and his father stared at me. You don't know what you're asking, the king said softly. I know exactly what I'm asking, I said. Adrian told me about the process. About how vampires can turn humans if there's willing consent. About how it takes 3 days for the transformation to complete. Elena, no, Adrian signed urgently. You can't give up your humanity for me. You can't change your entire existence. I'm not doing it just for you, I said, looking at him directly. I'm doing it because I've worked the night shift at a diner for 3 years, watching life pass by through a window. I'm doing it because I'm 24 years old and the most exciting thing in my life before you walked in was deciding which coffee brand to restock. I'm doing it because for the first time, I have a chance to matter. To make a real difference. The king's expression was unreadable. You understand there's no going back. That once you're turned, you're no longer human. You'd leave behind your family, your life, everything you know. I thought about Tommy. About my parents. About the small apartment I could barely afford and the art degree I'd never finished and the quiet desperation of a life that felt like it was on pause. I understand, I said. Can I have tonight to say goodbye? The king nodded slowly. We'll need to begin the process tomorrow night if you're to be fully turned before the council meeting. Are you absolutely certain? I looked at Adrian, at this boy who'd been invisible for over a century until someone finally chose to see him. At the hope and fear warring in his golden eyes. At the chance to be part of something bigger than myself. I'm certain. Adrian signed something I didn't catch, his movements too fast and emotional. His father translated quietly. He says you're the bravest person he's ever met. And that he doesn't deserve this sacrifice. I signed back to Adrian. It's not a sacrifice if I'm choosing it. And you deserve to be seen. By everyone. Always. I spent my last day as a human with Tommy and my parents. I couldn't tell them the truth, of course. How do you explain that you're about to become a vampire to help a mute vampire prince challenge the ancient power structures of an immortal society? Instead, I told them I was moving away for a job opportunity. That I'd be traveling, hard to reach, but that I loved them. Tommy signed to me, you're different. Something changed. My brother always could read me better than anyone. Yeah, I signed back. Something changed. I found my purpose. Good, he signed. You were always meant for more than that diner. That night, I went to Morrison's for the last time as a human. My boss Jerry was surprised when I gave my 2 weeks' notice on the spot, but he understood. You finally figured it out, he said. That you're too smart, too capable to be slinging hash forever. Good for you, Elena. Go do something amazing. If only he knew. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the king and Adrian arrived. We went to their hotel, a penthouse suite that probably cost more per night than I made in a month. The king explained the process one more time. 3 bites over 3 nights. Each one would take me closer to the transformation. By the 3rd night, I would die as a human and wake as a vampire. It will hurt, he warned. The venom feels like fire in your veins. Your body will fight it, try to reject it. You have to hold on, push through the pain. I can handle pain, I said, rolling up my sleeve. Then let's begin. The first bite was exactly as painful as he'd described. Like liquid fire pouring into my bloodstream, burning through every nerve. I gritted my teeth and held on, squeezing Adrian's hand as the venom spread. When it was over, I was shaking and covered in sweat, but alive. Changed, but alive. Adrian signed, day 1 complete. 2 more to go. The next 2 days were a blur of pain and change. I could feel my body shifting, adapting, becoming something new. My senses sharpened. I could hear conversations 3 floors down. Could see individual dust particles floating in the air. Could smell blood from the hospital 6 blocks away. By the 3rd night, I was barely human anymore. My heart was slowing, my body temperature dropping, my need for food fading away. The final bite was both the most painful and the most transcendent. I felt my human life slip away like a coat I was shrugging off. Felt something ancient and powerful take its place. When I woke up, I was different. My eyes, I learned later, had turned the same golden amber as Adrian's and his father's. My movements had that same supernatural grace. And the hunger, the deep burning hunger for blood, was like nothing I'd ever experienced. The king taught me to control it, to feed without killing, to navigate this new existence. And Adrian was there every step of the way, signing encouragement, sharing his own experiences of vampire life. 3 nights after my transformation was complete, we boarded the king's private jet. We were heading to Romania, to the ancient castle where the High Council convened. "Are you ready for this?" the king asked me as we flew through the night sky. I looked at my reflection in the window. Golden eyes stared back at me. I was a vampire now. Immortal. Powerful. Changed forever. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's go show them what they've been missing." The castle was exactly what you'd expect from 2,000-year-old vampires. Gothic architecture, towering spires, and an atmosphere of such ancient power it made the air feel heavy. We arrived at midnight. Guards met us at the gates, escorting us to the great hall where the council was assembled. 12 vampires sat on thrones arranged in a semicircle. They were old, so old that they barely looked human anymore. Their eyes held the weight of millennia, their presence radiated power that made my new vampire instinct scream at me to submit, to bow, to acknowledge their dominance. King Nikolai walked forward with Adrian and me flanking him. Every vampire in the room stared at us. At Adrian, the prince who'd always been hidden away. And at me, the newest, youngest vampire any of them had ever seen. King Nikolai Thorne, the vampire in the center throne, spoke. Her voice echoed with the voice, with command that made everyone in the room flinch. Everyone except Adrian, who couldn't hear it, and me, who was still too new to fully feel its effects. "You were summoned to explain the disturbing rumors we've heard. That your defective son has been consorting with humans. That you've allowed our secrets to be exposed. Explain yourself." The king didn't flinch. "Honored council, I come not to defend my actions, but to present a new perspective. My son is not defective. He is evolved." A ripple of shock went through the assembled vampires. "Evolved?" another council member scoffed. "He cannot speak. He cannot use the voice. He is the very definition of a failed vampire." "He is the definition of adaptation," the king countered. "Show them, Adrian." And my friend, my brave friend who'd been invisible for 114 years, stepped forward and began to sign. I translated as Adrian signed, my voice clear and strong in the cavernous hall. "For over a century, I have been dismissed because I communicate differently than you. But while you have been relying solely on the voice, on domination and command, I have learned something you have not. I have learned to truly listen." The council members shifted uncomfortably. "I have learned 6 human languages, not just to speak them, but to understand the cultures behind them. I have studied human art, human music, human literature. I know more about the world we hide in than any of you, because I had to learn. I couldn't command respect, so I earned knowledge instead." Adrian's hands moved with confidence now, with power. "You see my inability to use the voice as weakness. I see it as freedom. I am not bound by the same hierarchies that limit you. I can move through the human world invisible, learning, adapting, understanding. I am the bridge you need between our kind and theirs. Preposterous, one council member spat. We don't need bridges to humans. We are superior. Are you? I asked, stepping forward. Every eye in the room turned to me. Because from where I'm standing, you're so afraid of change, so locked into your ancient ways, that you've stopped growing. You've stopped learning. You've become stagnant. How dare you, the center vampire hissed. A newborn, speaking to us like this? I dare because I have nothing to lose, I said. And because everything Adrian signed is true. I was human 3 days ago. I lived in your world, moved through it, understood it in ways you never could because you've spent millennia hiding from it instead of engaging with it. I pulled out my phone, and several council members actually recoiled. This is the modern world. Humans have technology you can't imagine, connections that span the globe instantly, knowledge available at their fingertips. And you're still relying on the same power structures from 2,000 years ago. The center council member, who I learned later was named Anastasia and was over 2,400 years old, rose from her throne. The temperature in the room dropped. You dare criticize us? You, who have been vampire for less than a week. I dare because someone needs to, I said. You asked King Nikolai to explain rumors about Adrian. But the real question is why you're afraid of a prince who can't use the voice? Why does he threaten you so much? He doesn't threaten us, Anastasia said coldly. He simply has no value in our society. Then your society needs to expand its definition of value, Adrian signed, and I translated. I challenged the council to a test. Give me any task you think requires the voice, and I will accomplish it through other means. If I fail, I will accept whatever judgment you pass. But if I succeed, you will acknowledge that power comes in many forms. The council members looked at each other. Finally, Anastasia smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Very well, little prince. We accept your challenge. Tomorrow night, you will retrieve an artifact from the human world. A specific painting that hangs in a private collection in Paris, guarded by both human security and vampire wards. Most vampires would use the voice to command the humans to hand it over. Let's see how you fare without it. Adrian's face remained calm, but I could see his hands trembling slightly. This was exactly the kind of task designed to be impossible for him. The king looked worried. This was a trap, clearly. But Adrian simply nodded and signed, I accept. As we were escorted to our chambers for the day, the king pulled me aside. They want him to fail. They've given him an impossible task. Then we make it possible, I said. We show them what Adrian can really do. The next night, we traveled to Paris. The painting in question was a Renaissance masterpiece held in a private collection owned by a wealthy human businessman. The building was a fortress, security cameras everywhere, guards on every floor, and according to the king, vampire wards that would alert any vampire who tried to use supernatural powers inside. How are we supposed to get past all that? I asked. Adrian was already signing, a plan forming. We don't use vampire powers. We use human ingenuity. Over the next few hours, Adrian demonstrated skills I didn't know he had. He hacked the security system using techniques he'd learned from human internet forums. He created fake credentials that got us past the front desk. He used sign language to coordinate our movements silently, avoiding cameras and guards through careful timing and patience. And when we reached the vault where the painting was held, he didn't use strength or speed or any vampire ability. He picked the lock with tools he'd made himself, using knowledge from books he'd read during his centuries of invisibility. The painting was beautiful, a Madonna and Child rendered in stunning detail. Adrian carefully removed it from its frame, rolled it gently, and we made our way back out exactly the way we came. No alarms. No violence. No supernatural powers. Just intelligence, planning, and skills that had nothing to do with the voice. When we returned to the castle and presented the painting to the council, the shock on their faces was worth every moment of risk. How? Anastasia demanded. I didn't command anyone. I didn't use the voice. I didn't need to, Adrian signed. I used human technology, human methods, human thinking. Things you've all dismissed as beneath you. And it worked. The council deliberated for 3 hours. When they finally emerged, Anastasia's expression was difficult to read. Prince Adrian Nikolai Thorn, she said formally. You have demonstrated abilities we did not know existed outside the voice. You have shown us that our understanding of power has been limited. She paused, and I could tell this admission cost her. The council has decided to create a new position. Ambassador to the human world. You will be the first to hold this title. Your role will be to help bridge the gap between our societies, to learn and teach, to show other vampires that there are ways to exist in the modern world beyond hiding and commanding. Adrian's eyes went wide. He signed something quickly, and I translated. He asks if this means he's no longer considered defective. You were never defective, Anastasia said, and I thought I detected the faintest hint of respect in her voice. You were just different. And we were too rigid to see the value in that difference. We have spent 2,000 years resisting change. Perhaps it's time we learned to adapt. The king placed a hand on his son's shoulder, pride evident in his face. Adrian turned to me and signed, "Thank you. For everything. For seeing me. For believing in me. For changing your entire existence to help me be heard." I signed back, "Thank you for giving me a purpose. For showing me that being different isn't being broken. For letting me be part of something that matters." As we left the castle that night, the 3 of us together, I thought about how far we'd all come. A vampire king who'd learned to see his son. A prince who'd learned his voice mattered even when it couldn't be heard. And a waitress who'd become a vampire to help challenge an ancient power structure. We were all different now. Changed. But we were seen, we were heard, and we were finally, completely whole. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me about a time someone really saw you, really heard you when you needed it most. Those moments matter. Those connections change lives. And remember, being different doesn't mean being broken. Sometimes it means being exactly what the world needs, even if the world doesn't know it yet. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story. #Waitress saw everyone ignore the vampire king's mute son, until she spoke to him in sign language.